Good morning enough. Don't know how everybody else is finding this week. But yeah, I really struggled to get out of bed this morning. What is it? Maybe is it the thought that we're so close to Christmas? I don't know. I think my kids told me on the weekend there's only 34 days left until that Christmas festive season, if that's something that you celebrate. It is in my family. So I know that things start to get very hectic at this time of year when, we start planning how we're going to catch up, who are we going to see. And I think particularly given we've had so much time in lockdown, in the last little bit. So it's been interesting times. Morning. Hi. Can see Nadine has joined there. Lovely to see everyone this morning. As I was saying, this morning I really needed a cup of tea. This cup of tea could not come fast enough. I had trouble getting out of bed this morning. But I think, and my kids are struggling at the moment too, but there's only a couple more weeks left of school. So, we're getting there. We're getting in towards the end of the year. Okay, I'm going to give a couple more minutes. I hope everyone out there is really well. I hope you had a nice weekend. Actually, I was really lucky this weekend just gone. It was actually, my mother had a very significant birthday. I won't tell you what age because I'm sure she would not forgive me, but she had a significant birthday. And so my family, all my siblings and myself travelled to Newcastle. And Mum and Dad came down from Canberra and we all met in Newcastle and had a really lovely dinner. And it was so simple, but it was just so nice to be together as a family. I think, that's definitely one of the things that COVID has made me appreciate more is when you do have family that's spread out and about and it's, hard to see each other during COVID lockdowns and the like. I feel very fortunate that I was able to get to see my family on the weekend. So, okay, I think I'm going to start. So, good morning, everyone. I hope you've got your cup of tea or your cup of coffee. It's a great time to take a break during the day, and thank you for joining me here at Tea with Tink. If you're new to this forum, the way this works is that every Tuesday at 10:30, when I make a cup of tea, I take the opportunity to talk to somebody as I'm drinking that. And it's, very much a process that if I was working in an office in the old days, pre-COVID, when I was in a big, commercial space, you would have had a chat with somebody in the tea room. With that opportunity not being so easy to get in the last 12 months and, my life still being significantly different, I really look forward to these live conversations. I get to meet really interesting people, and the main thing is it gives me an opportunity to learn things that, I want to know and understand about the people across our community. So I try and bring a different mug. This is mine today. I don't know if you can read it. I kind of think this one's really appropriate for me at the moment because it's pretty much what's happening all the way around me and very much what's happening with all the people that are joining me. So, and it says the distance between your dream and reality is called action. And we are definitely all about taking action in North Sydney at the moment to get an independent to Canberra. I'm really excited, but I'm always excited on a Tuesday when I get to speak to people, but I'm really excited this morning to speak with an incredible gentleman called Alan Sunderland. Now, the reason I find Alan so fascinating is that he actually has had a very long career in terms of, he was editorial director at organisations like the ABC and the SBS. And what some of you may not know is that my professional life, I actually started as a public relations consultant. And I remember in those early days of PR, if you wanted to get something in the news, you had to have 3 separate sources who were all prepared to confirm what you were saying. It often took 3 to 5 days to get a story up. And in my life working across that area, we've gone from seeing, a news cycle that could sometimes take 3 to 5 days to a news cycle now that takes 7 seconds, I think was the latest estimate I heard, thanks to things like Twitter and Instagram. So Alan's going to join me today to talk about all things media and media evolution, and particularly about a concept called hyperlocal. Which I think is an amazing kind of idea that has started to develop And Alan is all over it. So I'm just going to let him in. And then we can have this conversation, because I think all of us would be feeling, we've never had as much access to information as we have in this current environment. Hi, Alan.
Hi there.
Hi. Hey, how are you going?
Very good. Now, can you hear me okay? I know you can see me, but I've got an entire computer set up here with a professional microphone, a high-quality camera. Couldn't get it to work, so we're just on my iPhone at the moment.
It's always the way, isn't it? Like the best made plans always. But no, I can hear you very, very clearly, Alan. And I must say, you're looking very dapper this morning. You've obviously had a good morning.
I make the effort. I do what I can, Kylea.
Good man, good man. Alan, I was just telling everyone who's joined us this morning a little bit about your background and the fact that you have been an editorial director at both ABC. You've been at the SBS. You're a Wakely Award-winning journalist, which, I just always find that is something that's an award that I respect immensely. Having worked across that communications sector for over 30 years now, I know that award is not given lightly. And it is given to people who do show an extraordinary degree of integrity and, accountability when it comes to their capacity to storytelling. I was also telling everyone, though, that I thought today we'd talk a little bit about hyperlocal media and what that means and how it's being developed. But so while I start to drink my cup of tea, would you mind, can you tell me and everyone listening today, in your own words, a little bit about your own background? Like how did you come to be involved with media here in Australia, and what was your experience with it?
Sure. Well, thanks for that introduction. I sound fantastic. I've impressed myself with that. I'm like a lot of other people who find themselves in journalism. I was at university wondering what I was going to do with myself, maybe become a teacher. Then I started tutoring a kid and thought, maybe this is not for me. My patience might not be all that's required. And look, I was interested in journalism. The ABC, as it still does to this day, offered cadetships. I fell into one, and the rest is history. I spent 40 years, 23 of those were at the ABC, 17 of them were at SBS. I did every possible job in the newsroom, really, and I found myself drawn more and more over time. I loved reporting, I was in the press gallery, but I finished up getting involved in the kind of the ethics and the principles of journalism, because that's what matters most to me, that idea that at the end of the day, you are serving a need in the community, and the community needs decent, reliable information if they're going to be good citizens. If they're going to participate in a democracy, they need to understand what's going on, and they need that information delivered as far as possible without a hidden agenda, without a spin. And that's what journalism at its best does. We all know how bad journalism can be when it fails, but that's what it does at its best. So a career in public broadcasting, I stepped back from full-time work a couple of years ago. I still write and think and talk about journalism on a number of different formats. But I got involved in hyperlocal journalism. I'm not active in it. I don't do it. It's being done by others. But I found myself, first of all, bemoaning the loss of local journalism, civic, boots-on-the-ground journalism. We all know the economic model has collapsed around the world. And so jobs are being shed. Thousands of jobs are being lost in the profession that I love. And that's a terrible thing. And it's particularly bad at a local level, because it's very time-consuming to have people going to your local council meeting, finding out what's happening in the community, looking at controversial developments, looking at traffic issues and education issues. People just can't afford the bodies on the ground anymore. Your local newspapers have become more and more simply real estate ads with a few glossy, timeless, soft pieces around it. I got interested in the emergence of local websites, just like so many others did, because it was happening in my community. It was happening around me. I found it a useful tool for someone who wanted to be active in their own community. And then I just got, I guess, a little bit more involved, given my background, in trying to do whatever I could to encourage it, to talk about it, to support it, and to give it the kind of ethical framework that, at the end of the day, every level of journalism needs. This is real grassroots community journalism, and it's a wonderful thing to see emerging from a collapsing industry. So I love it, I use it, I support it, and I try and do what I can to assist around it.
So I want to take a step back, because I'd like to start at the highest level, I guess, and then maybe bring ourselves all the way down to the hyperlocal. But I mean, I don't know whether you heard in the preamble, but I started as a junior PR person, would have been in the mid-90s. And I clearly remember having conversations with the chief of staff or the news desk on any story that I ever wanted to pitch. It would always be, where's your three sources, Kylie? Are they independent sources? You know, like, where's the data? What's backing you up? And unless I could provide all of that information, I mean, you know, news directors were fierce. It was really quite tough. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on, because I understand there's lots of discussion these days that newsrooms are maybe 1/10 the size of what I used to see them in their heyday. Is the current mode of modern journalism, the way we're seeing it at that macro level, is that sustainable, and is it serving the community in a way that you just described, which is that uncovering of truth and seeking of deeper information?
Yeah, look, that's a huge issue. We could talk forever. Don't worry, I won't. I want to pull out a few key strands from that. I don't want to be a kind of too depressed and too negative about the state of the media. It's easy because there's so much bad, sensational, opinionised journalism out there. It's easy to get consumed with that and forget that at its heart, there is still great journalism going on. And the internet has delivered all sorts of good things as well. I don't need to order an air freighted copy of a newspaper and wait 3 weeks like I used to in the 70s and 80s. We have great journalism at our fingertips. The ABC, I think, continues to do a magnificent job. Our newspapers generally serve us fairly well, but there are a few key issues that confront us. One in Australia is a lack of diversity of ownership. There's no doubt about that. The economies of scale mean that a lot of the little players suffer, and so you get one or two big voices. If you really love what the Australian and the Daily Telegraph are telling you every day, well, good on you. And likewise with the Guardian or the Sydney Morning Herald. But more diversity would be better. The second problem, even in those areas, great journalism is happening. But here's the key problem. Great journalism takes time and it costs money. Real reporting, digging out the facts that most people would like you to not report on, takes time and a thick skin and effort and editorial standards. It's hard. What's easy is doing cheap opinionising, just having a view. If you want to tell people what you reckon about things, that's easy. You can read the papers, form your own opinion, and too much of our journalism these days is full of opinion, spin, and polarisation. And that's because, not just because we've become a more polarised world, we have, but it's because it's cheap and it's easy. You can employ one person to sit in a TV studio and tell you how terrible things are and how COVID's a myth, and it's exciting and people listen to it and argue about it and it costs you nothing. If you want to uncover an important issue, you need to really do some hard yards. And that's why, with the collapse of the business model in journalism, the rivers of gold that used to flow from classified advertising are largely gone. Those pressures have affected the quality. And so at a macro level, at an international and a national level, you get still great journalism, but not enough of it, and too much opinionated nonsense. And at a local level, you get nothing at all. Newspapers are closing down, jobs are being lost, and that's where the hyperlocal fits in, because ordinary citizens are picking up that slack, not because it's profitable, not because they want to make a fortune out of it, but because they know it's important. They know what people need. They need it too. And that I find it's encouraging. It's a challenge to make it sustainable, but it's encouraging because what it tells me is that at their heart, people still want good journalism. They know it when they see it. They want someone to give it to them straight, and they might find the opinionating bloviators temporarily amusing, but when push comes to shove, they know they want good information. So at a national, international level, it is still happening. There should be more. I think we need to stop looking at journalism as something that the market can necessarily provide, like a product, and we need to start thinking of it as a public good. We need good roads, good schools, good hospitals. We need good information. And as a community, we need to be prepared to support that, recognise it and support it, because the market isn't necessarily going to fully deliver it anymore.
Everything you've just said really resonates with me, Alan, because I think it is about the business model behind media, isn't it, in the mainstream media? You know, I remember the days when I think the Daily Telegraph was 40 cents. You know, you buy a copy of the Daily Telegraph, you didn't need to pay for it because it was the advertising that was supporting that machine and that mechanism. And these days, you know, I go to buy the Sydney Morning Herald or whatever, and it's still only $4. And I'm like, how can my $4 be supporting this vehicle? It can't be, you know, like, and so I do think there's, and I notice when you go on and you become a fairly regular reader of things like The Guardian or The Conversation, you know, you're invited as a reader to actually step in and offer some financial support to that news source, because they don't sell their content, but they do encourage you to, you know, get behind the content. So everything you've just said really resonates with me. I'm interested because I do remember there was a period, maybe in the late 90s, early 2000s, where the big media agencies actually did look to migrate into what we now call hyperlocal. You know, I remember being briefed, I think it was by Fairfax Media at one point, saying, we've got this great idea, we're going to create all these little local community web groups and stuff. But it just crashed and burned because, you know, I think they were still trying to take that model into that environment. They still wanted to make money by selling advertising on those websites. So let's talk about the success.
Oh, sorry, well, let's not ignore the fact that many hyperlocals are trying to do the same thing. They want to sell advertising on their site. They want to make money. They want to make it support. It's much easier to do that in an online world because the overheads can be very low, and so it doesn't. Maybe one or two salaries is all you need to make it work. But I think one of the realities is that it was never going to work as a top-down process. It was never going to work by having a big organisation coming up with a one-size-fits-all plan. We'll just chuck a whole bunch of mastheads online. We'll call it Manly Local or Lane Cove Local or, you know, Mossman Local, and that'll be all. And we'll have a couple of local stories done by someone who's just churning them out for everyone. That's never going to work because there are better alternatives. And that's the thing about supporting your hyperlocals. I mean, I'm aware of In the Cove here in Lane Cove. It's a fantastic website. There's also the Manly Observer. I'm sure there are others. What they do is they plug people into the information that they really need. And so you are never going to succeed by imposing a one-size-fits-all category. We need to find ways to support those local websites. And the other thing that we need to recognise is it's kind of like the dirty little secret of journalism, that good journalism, good public interest journalism on civic matters, it never paid for itself. It never made money. You can't make money out of good journalism. You know, the average family that would buy the morning paper and the afternoon paper, sure, they read the news and they were kind of interested in it, but they bought it because they needed to find a job, they needed to sell a car, they needed to look for a house to buy, they needed to know what the weather was going to be tomorrow, what was on TV that night, whether their sports team had won. All of that information you can now find online at the press of a button. You don't need to buy a paper to do it. And so if I go back to my childhood, the paper was a token amount. You didn't always buy it, the average family, because they wanted the quality journalism. And also, every commercial TV bulletin was free, every commercial radio bulletin was free. So we are suddenly a little more surprised than we should be about why the best journalism we can do is not a market-driven, money-making enterprise, because it actually never was.
That's a really good point. I've never actually considered it in that frame, but yeah, that's 100%. I want to talk specifically a little bit about the ABC and SBS, because I think they are amazing channels to our community, but I know they have, particularly the ABC, in the last few years, it's almost been I don't want to sound it dramatic, but it's been a real battle to maintain funding levels for the ABC. What do you put that down to, Alan? What are your observations on what's going on there?
Look, there are two things that have been going on for as long as I can remember. One is that the ABC is seen by its commercial colleagues too often as a competitor that steals their market, steals their money, steals their profits. How can you make money out of your journalism when the ABC is handing it out for free? So there has been instinctive, ingrained resistance from certain parts of the established mainstream media to the ABC, just as there has been to the BBC in the UK since the 1930s. I can point to news articles by Keith Murdoch in the, saying, why on earth do we have this? That's one issue. And that has only got more intense as the market has become more difficult. And as the ABC has got better at it. It's fascinating. Through my entire career in journalism, the ABC used to come maybe second, third, it was usually third or occasionally fourth in the ratings. So it was never a real threat to Channel 7, Channel 9. And in radio, it was never, the number one rated station. The ABC is now the number one online news source in Australia. It has established itself in the last few years, bigger than News Corp, bigger than Fairfax, Channel 9 Media. And so that makes it a real competitor. The second problem, of course, and there's no apolitical way to say that, governments have been strangling it for a long time, both Labor and Liberal, but more so the coalition. And there is a not all that surprising phenomenon, which I think is very visible at the moment. The current government, I think, does not like scrutiny, doesn't like being held to account. It's been critical of the Auditor General, it's been critical of the ANAO, it doesn't want an ICAC, and it's been critical of the ABC, seeing attacks on the government as being somehow anti-Australian. And don't get me wrong, the ABC makes lots of mistakes. I would have been out of a job if it didn't have mistakes, because that was my role for many years, to fix those mistakes. ABC and SBS are not perfect, but they are independent. And part of the problem is that governments instinctively do not like to fund things that they don't get to control. And so the ABC is always under attack. And the more the ABC can present itself as being funded by the people, not by the government, it will get the support that it needs. It retains very strong support. And I like to point out to people that in the mid-80s, the ABC had one TV station, not four. It had no online, and it had fewer radio stations than it now has, and it had more money and more staff in real terms. If all we had done was frozen the ABC's funding in the mid-1980s and then just adjusted it for inflation from then on, instead of being a $1 billion operation, it would be closer to 1.5. It would have hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars more than it has today, and it would still be, per capita, much, much smaller than the BBC. So the strangulation of the ABC has been going on for 30 years, and it has been terrible. We see an industry of journalism collapse around us. We as a community have one well-organised, well-funded way of solving that problem, and instead of embracing it, we strangle it. It's crazy.
And how do you, because you're right, that whole opportunity for integrity and transparency and accountability, I think, is a massive part of people turning to media. And I guess there's two questions to me in that then. Is when that is your function as a media organisation, like you have a mandate to hold those in power to account, how do you manage that reporting imperative and not look like you're leaning particularly left or leaning particularly right? Like, because it appears to me that seems to be the attack, is always, well, you can't, don't listen to the ABC if you want to hear something about the Liberal National Party, because they're always going to attack us. So how do you get that balance? And is it a matter of balance, or is it just that the truth hurts and it doesn't matter if it's left or right, you'll tell the truth? Yeah.
That is the essence of the challenge, and the ABC will always be contested space, and so it should be. I do find it innovating from time to time, because I spend a lot of time engaging with people, and there is no doubt that a large slab of the conservative thought in Australia will tell you that the ABC is hopelessly left-wing. I spent a lot of time trying to deal with that and manage that. I also find myself in recent years, because I was reasonably active on Twitter, dealing with a very, very loud and convinced voice on Twitter that the ABC has been nobbled by the government and is cowed and is cowardly and doesn't do its job properly because they're not doing enough to call people to account. There's only one way to deal with that, and that's been my life for a decade now, and that is to have transparent, consistent editorial standards that are available to the public and that you hold yourself accountable to. So you say, look, we don't believe in balance, everybody gets 50% of the time and everyone's happy. We believe in balance that follows the weight of evidence. If somebody is telling a lie, you call it a lie. If somebody's saying something that's untrue and you don't know whether they're deliberately lying or simply mistaken or deluding themselves, be accurate, be fair. And the coverage, the challenge for the ABC is the coverage needs to recognise the diversity of opinion in the community and give them appropriate weight. So we have standards at the ABC, which you can look up on a website and complain about if you think they're failing, that says follow the facts, don't omit material facts, make sure that all perspectives are given due prominence. You don't let the idiot fringe have equal time, but you acknowledge, and you are always driven by the weight of evidence. Now, the idea that the ABC is the only media organisation in the world that's infallible and never gets that wrong is, of course, ludicrous. We should, as a community, be able to complain about and take issue with those failings without falling back on, oh, they're just hopelessly biased. One of the most common criticisms is, why is there no conservative voice on the ABC? Well, the reality is, my job when I was there was to make sure that every voice on the ABC, no matter their personal background, was fair to every perspective. So I used to say to people, don't tell me that you're convinced Lee Sales is a lefty, because, by the way, Twitter is now convinced she's a righty. I don't care about that. Tell me what they put to air, tell me what they broadcast that was problematic, and I will look at that. And that's the way we need to handle it. But look, the ABC has always been a political football, and it will always remain so. We have to live with that. We have to hope that behind that, the public appreciate what we do. Sorry, I see I'm still saying we. I've been gone 2 years. Still appreciate what they do and still support them. And every independent survey tells you that they do. The ABC is still, along with SBS, the most trusted media organisations in the country, and that is what you have to hold yourself to as the real standard.
Mm. And then, so with the emergence of the hyperlocals, which, and actually it's really interesting, isn't it? It's not until I've just started to speak with you, Alan, that there's a lot of similarities between what's been happening in the media landscape with what's been happening in the political landscape. Really, it sounds like it, this whole, it can't be a top-down approach, which is what we consistently see with party politics going into community, this emergence of, hyperlocal, so community movements in politics, hyperlocal media. Where do you see it all ending? What do you think will be the resolution in this particular communication space?
Look, I think I'm an optimist, and so I believe that people do want good quality information about the world they live in at a national, international, state and at a local level. I think the media will continue to be able to meet a lot of those needs, and it will become harder and harder for that to happen without a different approach, a different consideration of how you fund these things and how you support them. And we're no different to the rest of the world. America are absolutely dealing with this without having the benefit of a public broadcaster. Europe the same. And so I think what will happen is that there will be a greater recognition of the need for these to be embraced, supported, and it'll always be a mixed model. There will be advertising supporting hyperlocals. There will be local subscribers, and there has already been government funding. We've noticed one of the problems in recent years is that the government has recognised journalism is failing and it's a public good. I congratulate them, both sides of politics, for that. They have created funds with tens of millions of dollars to help support that. What I'm involved in at the moment is most of that money has gone to the big players. Most of that money has gone to the few organisations that dominate. So there's a group of us at the moment who are trying to do everything we can to give hyper-local news, local news sites, we prefer to call them local community independent news sites and news outlets, to give them a seat at the table, to give them, to wave the flag and say, hey, we exist, we are journalists too. We're not just a bunch of ratbag bloggers. We are journalists, we have standards, we are performing a service, because the kind of money that the government can and does provide to the industry, to journalism right now, will do enormous good at a local and hyper-local level if they recognise that. So we're trying to get people organised, give them a bit of a voice, give them some support so that they can start to get some of the support that will make a real difference in local journalism. And I'm optimistic about that, because this is not something that's being dreamt up in a back office of someone trying to make a buck. This is something which is emerging from the community, and that's what gives it its strength. It's a challenge to make it sustainable. It relies on the goodwill of hard-working individuals like Jackie Barker at In the Cove, but a little bit of support, a little bit of recognition, a bit more visibility, and people will start to see and accept and understand the value that has. So I'm optimistic about that. And there'll still be big players doing great work at different levels as well. And we just need to do more as a community to support the good stuff and point out the flaws in the opinionated nonsense that's out there.
Wow, that was magic. I love the way you just summed that up so nicely, Alan. I think, you know, and at the end of the day, probably that is one of the key takeouts, isn't it? Is that the best way to find your way to the source of truth is to look at multiple resources. You know, like no singular resource is going to get it absolutely right every single time. I think you touched on the polarization of our community, and to me, that's almost like it's a catch-22 situation. So, is the community polarizing, therefore the media is polarizing, or is the media polarizing and therefore the community is polarizing? You know, there is that real sense of we are dependent on each other for information and perspective. And I think in a world where people are constantly barraged with information, I can understand why some of us want just a really simple answer. Just give us the headline. What's the headline? I just want to know the headline, and then I'm going to move on because I've got 1,000 things to do today. But listening to you today, I think my key takeouts are that it is really important that we do have a strong, free media in our country, and we have a strong source of journalism which is not reliant on a commercial imperative, and that's where the ABC plays a really important part in our community. I love that message about if you are feeling like you're watching something and you feel that it's in some way not correct or inappropriate, speak up, report it. Don't just sit at home grumbling. Look into it. Actually reach out and find out what is the editorial policy of what you're watching, and, you know, make your thoughts heard. I also hear from you very clearly the importance of us as residents supporting hyperlocals, you know, and being prepared to subscribe to them, buy them, give positive feedback to the people that are working in these areas, because they are providing a public service, you know. And I think that it is true that the heyday of, you know, journalism in the 70s, I don't know, the 80s and 90s in particular, those massive teams, they have just disintegrated, and these are really intelligent people who are committed to providing a community service, which is, you need information, I'll find the information for you and connect you with it. So I think that there is a little bit of, you know, there's consumer responsibility for us too, in terms of accepting that if we want it, we need to be prepared to support it and advocate for it and consume it appropriately. And I guess my last thing is that it is a world of infinite amounts of information, and it is all too easy to sometimes read a headline and just go no further. And, you know, one of my observations about media would be, I still get the impression that somebody else is writing the headlines while somebody is writing the body copy. You sometimes read a headline and its relationship to the body copy is not as strong as, you know, what you would hope it to be. So it really is look beyond the headlines, look beyond the spin, you know, and that need for accountability and integrity, you know, I think that's something that our community is calling out for across the board, whether it's media, whether it's local government, whether it's federal government. You know, people just want to know that the facts are being explored, and the weight of evidence, that's the phrase I'm going to take out today. It's about the weight of evidence and letting that weight guide us. So yeah.
And just two final points for me, just on that massive amount of overload of information, real problem. Interestingly, the ABC decided many years ago that they took a decision to substantially reduce the number of stories they were putting on their website. They used to just put everything on the news website, story after story after story. They actually decided to do fewer stories and more long reads, more longer pieces, because they realised that that's what people were looking for, not just the instant headlines. And the second thing to remember about what's happening in the local media, which is that there is a responsibility on the on the public to do more and to get more involved. But that responsibility is also an opportunity, because the great thing about hyperlocals is the opportunity is there not just to support it, put your hand in your pocket, but to assist, to include your views, to get involved. A lot of these hyperlocals rely on an army of citizen journalists reporting on what they see, news tips and ideas. So the great thing about the democratisation of news is that at a local level, it's as much as an opportunity as it is a responsibility.
I love that, the democratisation of media. So it's in our hands and the opportunity is there for us to embrace and consume. So thank you, Alan. I finished my cup of tea. Did you manage to get through yours? I saw your ABC mug.
Yeah.
Alan, thank you for the chat this morning and thank you for everything that you're continuing to do. I think the one constant in our world is change. Yeah. And clearly this is, we see it almost every day when it comes to the media landscape in terms of how we're consuming information and reporting on information. I guess, to everyone watching today or watching this later, I think it is a really amazing opportunity for us to explore how we are consuming information, where that information comes from, and to really consider for ourselves what are our expectations in terms of accountability and transparency and honesty. I think there was probably a lot of Australians like myself who watched the rise of Donald Trump and then his era in politics in America, where there was a very strong sense of where's the truth. Just because you say something doesn't make it true. And I think here in Australia, we have we have a cultural norm which expects that we're fair dinkum. Yeah, it's one of our major colloquialisms is that Aussies are fair dinkum. So I think it's really important that we are making sure that integrity and honesty is playing out right across our environment and, making sure that's, held to account in our media as well. So thank you so much for the chat this morning. And Alan, and I'll look forward. I know you're doing a North Sydney Conversations panel tomorrow night, is it?
That's right. Yep. I get to be quiet for a while there and talk to a few other people about their vision for the media, but hopefully it'll be an interesting discussion.
Oh, it looks like a cracking one. So to everyone, if you're interested in hearing more about the media landscape and how integrity and transparency, are playing out in our community, please sign up to the North Sydney Conversations Q&A tomorrow night. All things Team Tink. The other thing I would just say is if you have someone in your family or if you yourself are under the age of 30 and you're looking to actually meet with other people who are interested in politics and particularly interested in politics when it comes to the North Sydney and Warringah areas, on Friday night this week there is a free screening of a Craig Rucastle movie, The Big Deal, and it's an excellent movie. It tackles really serious topics but in a way which makes it infinitely consumable, and you're watching it at times you're not sure whether you want to laugh or cry, but it is a really, back to that point about accountable and transparent reporting, it's a really, really great movie. So the tickets are free. You can just go on site. I'm sure there's a link on my website. I'm sure there's a link on Zali's website. Please come along because we'd love to see as many, people under the age of 30 they're having their say about what they want to see in our political future, because that is democracy. That is democracy in action, and it's one of the amazing things about living in this country. So, Alan, have a great day, and to everybody out there again, thanks for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. Okay, bye.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan.
Authorised by Kylea Tink, North Sydney, New South Wales.